thank you for coming to my Narcolepsy Network presentation. I am Matthew Horsnell. I'm the world's strongest person having narcolepsy with cataplexy. I'm a social media and legislative advocate, a Rising Voices of Narcolepsy speaker, and a health union blogger. If you're on Instagram, I'm at mhorsnell, and my Twitter is at @matthorsnell. Next slide, please. Today, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about social media advocacy and legislative advocacy. In regards to social media, I want to talk with you about the different platforms and also the power of your story, about blogging and about presenting. And with legislative advocacy, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experiences on Hill Day and then the follow-ups and legislative recess meetings that you can be a part of. Next slide, please. As far as reaching people, there's really no better way to share your story than through social media. And, we're blessed to have a number of different platforms with active people with narcolepsy on there. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, those are all great options for you as far as sharing your story. One of my favorite opportunities that I've had in advocacy was one of my first ones, and that was when I worked with the folks at No Narcolepsy. They had a nice photo shoot and video interview, and they were able to glean some of the quotes that I made and help meme me. And if you try to say that 5 times fast, you'll see how difficult it is. But one of the great things about this is it consolidates your message. And so if you're looking to make memes, that's a great way to reach your audience. They don't necessarily have to be with your face behind them, but don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself. You're the only person who can do that. Nobody's going to do that for you. That's one of my favorite quotes. This is a part of who I am. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of laziness. And overcoming stigma and reducing stereotypes is really what being the world's strongest person having narcolepsy with cataplexy is all about. So if you want to go to the next slide. I have a disorder that may make my muscles weak, but that doesn't mean I can't be strong. Again, that's just about the messages that I try to convey. I have had the opportunity to have my face on a giant cutout, which was kind of cool. And I keep asking for it when they're done with it so I can put it up in my bedroom. I'm not sure if the kids would think that was a great idea, but it's something that I've been thinking about. And then also I've had little informational flyers, and I've actually had a total of 3 people ask for my autograph. One of them was my mom, but if you're interested in receiving an autographed No Narcolepsy pamphlet, feel free to hit me up afterwards. I'm pretty sure I can squeeze that into my schedule. All right, next slide, please. The power of your story is where you can really excel when you're getting out there advocating. The best responses I get are when I open up and show, the human side of me. When I show people what it's like to be a husband and a dad, what it's really like to be Matt Horsnell. The workout selfies are great. Don't get me wrong, I love sharing those, but I tend to get the best feedback and the most impressions when I end up showing, my family. And that just goes to the point that when you share your own personal story, you're helping to make a connection that your audience won't soon forget. Statistics and facts can take your story so far, but when you're able to sit down and relate the personal aspect to it, it makes for a memorable experience. That's one thing that I've learned through my Rising Voices of Narcolepsy experience. I've had a chance to talk with, audiences, ranging in a virtual setting from 8 to groups of the pharmacy school. I spoke to 35 folks, and then, I've had a chance to speak to 150 people at a pharmaceutical company. So, and really what they're looking for was authentic Matt Horsnell. And when you share, what it's like to really live with this condition, the good and the bad, that's when your story really resonates. If you want to go to the next slide, please. I do like to, be creative with my approach. So I like to share, some pictures I may make, with some art apps. And of course, I always love sharing my post-workout muscle selfies. That's kind of become my hallmark and, a source of people kidding me a little bit, but I enjoy it. It's, not every workout is easy, but when I can complete it, it's all smiles. And, it's an investment in myself that I'm making, and it's helping me with my symptom control, symptom management, and just overall self-confidence as well. It is important too that, I don't always just show those positive experiences, and that I show a little more vulnerable aspect of it. And, for me, there's nothing more vulnerable than, showing a little bit of me sleeping. I think this is one where my son Caden, I asked him to come take a picture after Daddy fell asleep. So I got to give him photo credit for that. If you want to go to the next slide. Another thing that I like to do is I really like to share about some of my artwork. The rock creation there, that's Rock Pablo. He actually sits on the desk of astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson in his Star Talk Radio office. And that was my thank you for him, for all that he does for advocating for science. And the butterfly there, I drew that when I was shortly after I was diagnosed in 2007, and the combination of, kind of figuring out what was going on, the stimulants, my mind kind of woke up, and it just, this creativity tended to flow out. And I found that there's so much untapped creativity in this community that it's really, awe-inspiring to see what other people are able to create with their minds. And it's a very soothing practice. The rock sculptures, I go and I collect the fossils and individual rocks with my son, and I'm able to incorporate those into, so I call it my anthropomorphic art, late at night when my brain is still on, but it's not quite functioning at a high enough level to really be doing a whole lot of other work. And then just recently I've started blogging for Health Union, and it's a great way to kind of expand on what I do with my post every day. It just takes a more in-depth look into, my thoughts and what it's like for me to live with this condition. Everybody has a different perspective. We all share common threads, and our symptoms are quite similar. But for me to be able to articulate, specifics of living with this condition has been just invaluable to my confidence, but also, me sharing my story. Next slide, please. As far as the message that you're sending out, the use of hashtags is tremendously important. You can reach people who aren't necessarily your followers, people who subscribe to the different hashtags, and it's just a great way to increase your influence and get your message out there a little bit greater. When you start off and you only have 10 followers or 100 followers, in order for people to see that message, you want to make sure that you're giving them an opportunity to see that. And so I've included some hashtags here that I found successful in getting my story out there. Next slide, please. And just remember that in social media, there's always going to be somebody bigger, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be better. Your story is what is valuable, and somebody with a following base of 3,000 or 5,000 might have more eyes, but that doesn't mean that their message is going to be more profound. And so really, in reality, it's about what you share, and sharing your authentic self. There's really nothing greater. There's no greater gift that you can give to our community. That picture there is of a fellow named John Heck. He's a strength and conditioning coach at the University of North Carolina. It's one of my favorite pictures because when I brought it home and showed my daughter, she wanted to know who the very small man standing next to Daddy was. And it just, at first I got a little upset, but then I realized, wait a second, she might actually think I look like that. So I take it as a compliment as well. All right, next slide. I want to talk a little bit about legislative advocacy. Stephanie is going to do a great job of explaining Rare Disease Week and how you can become involved with that. That's a great narcolepsy network partnership. Most importantly, I want to talk about your voice and your vote. I mean, that's the greatest way that you can impact, future legislation is through putting the right people in office. You do have an opportunity to go and speak with your elected officials. This these were 2 different trips. I took a trip in 2019 and 2020. That's me with some sleep researchers, kind of the rock stars of the Sleep Research Society. And also you can see some other rock stars there. There's Evelyn on the steps, and Ishika, and there's Julie as well. And these were taken when I went up in a collaboration Hill Day with Project Sleep and Sleep Research Society. And it's just a matter of, increasing sleep research funding and sleep disorder research funding. Next slide, please. You don't have to wait to go to Washington to make that difference. You could meet with representatives from your legislative office here in town. Right now, they're actually in an August recess. May not be the best time to reach out for an in-person meeting, but you can also reach out for some virtual meetings as well. Even a phone call and email is a great way to advocate for changes that need to be made in legislation. The nice thing about the ask of the rare disease community and the ask of the sleep community is that sleep and rare diseases are bipartisan. They don't discriminate who they affect, and everybody is kind of affected equally. So even though I may, only share a few common threads with some of my senators, that doesn't mean that we can't get along and, really collaborate. And, it's the true essence of what Washington can be, is when you make a bipartisan push to get something done that helps and affects people. And so, if you're happen to be on the opposite side of the political aisle, just remember that sleep affects everybody. If you're looking at it from a broad perspective, I think it's 1 in 5 people are affected with sleep apnea. So there's a big umbrella that you can rally under. And the effects of sleep, like I say, they affect everybody. So next slide. Okay, well, that's the end of my slide presentation, but I did want to say just thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Hello, I'm Mackenzie Zorin, and I am 20 years old, and I've been living with narcolepsy with cataplexy for 10 years. I want to start with this quote from a woman I greatly admire, Helen Keller. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. I picked this quote because when I was first diagnosed with narcolepsy with cataplexy, I felt like everything, all the plans that I had for the future were stripped away. And everything I loved. I love sports. I love to travel. And so my identity was no longer existent because of no longer being able to do what I loved. And so I want to explain that my first, one of the biggest aspects I contribute to my success now in living a fulfilling narcoleptic life is advocacy. I started when I was first diagnosed. I was very ashamed and in denial that I had narcolepsy and didn't really want to admit it or talk about it with anyone. But after many years and a lot of personal growth, I began to own having narcolepsy. And once I did, I felt this freedom and ability to talk to others about it. But one thing I greatly recommend is starting small. And so I started my advocacy with something I was very comfortable and super passionate about. So for me, I love sports. I love to watch sports, play sports, you name it. And so I played a lot of sports in high school, and I started there. So I actually did high school volleyball, and then my great, wonderful mother would drive me straight to competitive soccer practice. This, you may say, I was pushing the bounds of what a narcoleptic is expected to do, but I think that me doing this really showed myself I'm doing more than what a normal high schooler does, and it just gave me a sense of security, I guess, in what I could accomplish in the future having narcolepsy. And so in order to do this, I started, well, of course, I had to tell my coaches. Like before I would have practice for soccer, I'd have like a 10-minute gap. I would actually sleep on the field. I'll never forget like waking up from a nap and having like the grass indents on my cheek. But It's just something that now I laugh about. But at the time, it was very important that I had that nap because it allowed me to do a sport that brought me great joy. And so I started, of course, talking to the coaches and then my teammates. And when you start advocating on a small scale like that in an area you're comfortable in, I think it really helps you gain confidence and in owning that you're narcoleptic and that we all have our own battles that we face on a daily basis, and narcolepsy just happens to be one that is more unseen than most. And so, from a small scale, I realized how much I could actually help people, even those who don't have narcolepsy, by advocating for it. But one thing I want to point out is that advocacy can be the word itself can be very intimidating because, like, when you think of advocacy, I think it's an intimidating word. And so, for me, advocacy means enlightening others on things that they don't know much about or have a skewed perspective. And so I started small, but then I realized that my community really did not know much about narcolepsy by people I would talk to in public and stuff. And so I realized that I needed to be better equipped with the ability to talk to people outside of my comfort zone. So like I said, I started with sports and coaches and teammates, and I feel like you're comfortable, so it's okay if you don't know everything. But then I wanted to be better equipped to help more of my community. And what better way of doing this was I took the youth ambassador, I became a youth ambassador for Narcolepsy Network. And that training really, I can surely say that provided me with the knowledge and the tools I needed to become an overall holistic advocator for narcolepsy. And so with that, I learned how to write a proclamation and press releases. And so now I'll explain. Okay, so I start advocating small with high school sports, something I'm passionate about. And then I take the training. And then I'm ready. Okay, so it can be intimidating, but what I did was I asked my mayor, because in my state, asking for a proclamation, you ask your mayor. I'm from California, by the way, but presently I'm living in Florence, Italy. I will elaborate on that in a bit. But, okay, so I asked my mayor for a proclamation recognizing March 12 as National Sleep Awareness Day. And I received the proclamation with his signature and everything, and the cool stamp. And then I actually wrote a press release from my local newspaper and county newspaper and got accepted into the newspaper. And so once that was published, it actually gave me so many opportunities that I never expected to have for advocacy. And so I think that seeing how one was small, like it took effort, but this one small act of advocacy really lit my fire and fueled my fire for advocating on a bigger scale or getting more creative with my advocacy. And so from this, as I mentioned earlier, I love sports. And so since I had graduated high school from this time, after the press release and everything, I was applying to college or was accepted to colleges. It was summer. I wasn't doing soccer no longer, and so I started doing kickboxing. Well, I got really into kickboxing, and so I figured out everything I do, I like to do with 110%. And so I noticed that when you pair your passions with something that you're doing, I was able to dedicate my all to it. And so what I did was I go to this boxing studio called Title Boxing. And so I made an event called Knockout Narcolepsy. It has a nice ring to it, if I don't say so myself. And so Knockout Narcolepsy, with that, all the proceeds went to Narcolepsy Network, but I was also able to bring in my community with my advocacy. And so it was really great to involve my community on something I was passionate about in both advocacy and interest-wise. And actually, I think that a lot of people have a misinterpretation of narcolepsy when they first hear it. Like they think you fall asleep on demand, or just things that are portrayed inaccurately in TV shows and movies. And so this is just one event of many things I've done for advocacy. But now what I really want to touch on is how like crazy and amazing my life is, and how much I have achieved. Like I humbly say how much I've achieved having narcolepsy and cataplexy, and surprising myself every day with what I am able to do. I presently, like I said, I'm living in Florence, Italy. I was studying here, and then coronavirus happened. I actually chose to stay, and I have my own apartment actually in San Diego, and one thing that I contribute to my success living alone is, one, being very on top of it with my medications, but two is also a confidence in myself, and just having interest. Like I love to play music, and I can be content being alone. And so I chose to stay in Italy during the lockdown or quarantine. And then now I actually am volunteering with the ambulances here. And so I'm able to advocate to people every day. I really cannot count how many times I've talked about narcolepsy because people ask. I don't know, they don't even ask about narcolepsy, but I'm able to tie it in to our conversation. And so that is one thing I think, that once you become comfortable advocating for yourself, you are able to talk about everything and tie it into advocating about narcolepsy. So you can take a conversation on the elevator with a stranger and start talking about narcolepsy, and people are very open to learning new things, especially when I've got to admit, narcolepsy is a unique disorder, and it just provides a foothold into reaching others through advocating. So this is a little bit about me and how I have found peace and contentment in advocating with narcolepsy.